The scorching Nevada sun beat down on Belmont like God's own judgment, as Tabitha Harlow stood in the dusty thoroughfare, clutching a notice of eviction in her trembling hands. The desert wind whipped her copper hair across her scarred face as townsfolk passed with averted eyes and whispered comments. In 1876, a woman alone with a face like hers had few prospects, but Tabitha had run out of places to run. 3 days, she whispered, reading the paper again as if the words might change. 3 days to pay or leave. The boarding house had been her last refuge after fleeing San Francisco, and now even that sanctuary was crumbling. Tabitha tucked the notice into her worn pocket and adjusted her shawl higher to conceal the burned scars that twisted down the left side of her face and neck. The disfigurement had been her husband's parting gift 5 years ago before he disappeared into the night, leaving her to face a world that flinched at her appearance. The general store's bell jangled as Tabitha entered, keeping her gaze fixed on the wooden floor. She needed supplies, but more urgently, she needed work, any work. Mrs. Harlow, the shopkeeper, Mr. Reynolds, acknowledged her with the same discomfort most showed in her presence. "What can I help you with today?" "I'm wondering if you've heard of any positions available in town, Mr. Reynolds. I'm skilled with numbers and can read and write better than most." Reynolds stroked his beard, his eyes darting to her scarred cheek before quickly moving away. "Can't say I have, madam. Most folks who need help." "Well, they prefer someone who won't." He trailed off, reddening. "Someone who won't frighten customers," Tabitha finished for him, her voice flat. "I didn't mean you did, but it's all right. It's the truth." She purchased a small sack of flour and beans with her dwindling funds and left, chin held high despite the hollowness in her chest. As she stepped back onto the street, commotion erupted from the saloon. The swinging doors burst open and a man flew backward, landing hard in the dirt. A tall figure followed, silhouetted against the saloon's dim interior. "Try cheating me again, and next time you'll be meeting your maker," the man growled, his voice carrying across the street. Tabitha froze, watching as the tall stranger adjusted his hat and stepped fully into the sunlight. Unlike the man sprawled in the dirt, he moved with a confident ease that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. His dark duster billowed slightly in the breeze, revealing a glimpse of the pistols holstered at his hips. "Xavier Prescott don't take kindly to card sharks," someone muttered nearby, and several onlookers nodded knowingly. Tabitha had heard whispers about Xavier Prescott since arriving in Belmont 3 months ago. A rancher with land north of town, he had a reputation as a fair man, but dangerous when crossed. Some said he'd been a lawman back east before coming to Nevada territory. Others claimed he'd ridden with outlaws. The truth, like most things in the West, was likely somewhere in between. As if sensing her scrutiny, Xavier Prescott's eyes suddenly locked with hers across the dusty street. Tabitha quickly looked away, but not before noticing something unexpected in his gaze, not the usual pity or revulsion, but simple acknowledgement. As if her scars were just another feature, like the color of her hair, she hurried away, clutching her meager purchases. That momentary connection unsettled her more than any disgusted stare ever could. The boarding house was quiet when Tabitha returned to her small room. Mrs. Walton, the proprietress, had been kind enough in her way, but business was business. Without payment, Tabitha would be on the street by week's end. She sat heavily on the edge of her narrow bed, calculating her remaining funds for the 100th time. The answer hadn't changed, not enough. Not nearly enough. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss Harlow," Mrs. Walton's voice came through the thin wood. "There's a gentleman downstairs asking after you, says he has a business proposition." Tabitha's heart quickened. "Who is it, Mr. Prescott, the rancher?" Tabitha's hand flew unconsciously to her scarred cheek. Why would Xavier Prescott want to speak with her? Their eyes had met for barely a moment. Still, she couldn't afford to dismiss any potential opportunity, no matter how unlikely. "Tell him I'll be right down," she said, quickly smoothing her simple dress and tucking stray hairs into her modest bun. Xavier Prescott was even more imposing up close. Standing in Mrs. Walton's small parlor, he seemed to fill the space with his presence. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and weathered lines around his eyes spoke of years squinting into the sun. Tabitha guessed him to be in his mid-30s, about 10 years her senior. "Miss Harlow," he greeted her with a slight nod. "Thank you for seeing me." "Mrs.," she corrected automatically. Though I've been a widow for some time, something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps. "Mrs. Harlow, then, I'll be direct. I've recently lost my ranch manager to consumption, and I find myself in need of someone with a head for figures and correspondence." Tabitha stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You're offering me employment. I'm offering you an interview," he clarified. "Reynolds mentioned you were looking for work and had skills with numbers and writing. My operation's growing, and I need someone who can manage the books, handle correspondence, and oversee the household accounts." "Mr. Prescott," she said carefully, "I appreciate you considering me, but people tend to find my appearance disturbing." She gestured vaguely toward her scarred face, hating the necessity of acknowledging what everyone else noticed first. Xavier Prescott's expression didn't change. "I'm hiring someone to manage accounts, not compete in a beauty pageant. The position includes room and board at the ranch house. If you're interested, I'll send my wagon for you tomorrow morning. We can discuss specifics then." Before she could respond further, he tipped his hat and strode from the room, leaving Tabitha speechless in his wake. "Well," Mrs. Walton said from the doorway, eyebrows raised nearly to her hairline. "Xavier Prescott offering you a position. Never thought I'd see the day. Why is that?" Tabitha asked, turning to face the older woman. Mrs. Walton shrugged. "He keeps to himself, mostly. Runs that ranch with a handful of loyal men, doesn't socialize much in town. Some say he's running from something back east. Aren't we all?" Tabitha murmured. "You going to take it?" Tabitha thought of her dwindling funds, the eviction notice, and the cold shoulders she'd received throughout town. "Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice, dear," Mrs. Walton said, her voice softening. "Just not always good ones." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the autumn air crisp with promise. Tabitha packed her few possessions, 2 dresses, undergarments, a treasured book of poetry, and a small photograph of her parents into a battered carpet bag. She had spent a restless night weighing her options, but in the light of day, the decision was clear. Xavier Prescott's offer represented her best chance, perhaps her only chance at surviving. The wagon arrived promptly at 9, driven by a weathered man who introduced himself as Emmett, the ranch foreman. Mrs. Harlow," he corrected himself after Tabitha's gentle reminder. "Boss said to fetch you and your things. You ready to see the rocking P?" The journey north took most of the morning. As they left Belmont behind, Emmett proved surprisingly talkative, filling the silence with stories about the ranch and its owner. "Mr. Prescott bought the place 5 years back when it was barely more than a shack and a few hundred acres of scrubby rangeland. Now we're running near 2,000 head of cattle on 15,000 acres. Man's got a vision, that's for certain." "He's done well for himself," Tabitha observed, watching the landscape change as they traveled, desert giving way to lusher grazing land as they approached the mountains. "Had to fight for every inch," Emmett said, his voice hardening. "Cattlemen's Association tried to run him out first year. Then there was trouble with rustlers. Through it all, the boss held firm, never seen a man so determined." "What was he before he came here?" Tabitha ventured. Emmett shrugged. "Doesn't speak much about it. Was a lawman for a spell, I know that much. Rumor has it he lost his wife and child back east. Fever, they say. But that's not my business to tell, and I'd appreciate if you didn't mention I said anything." Tabitha nodded, filing the information away. A man with losses of his own might understand why she kept to herself, why she flinched when strangers got too close. They crested a rise, and suddenly the rocking P spread before them, a sprawling ranch house of sturdy logs and stone, surrounded by well-kept-out buildings, corrals, and a large barn. In the distance, cattle grazed on surprisingly green pastures fed by what appeared to be an elaborate irrigation system. Mr. Prescott diverted water from the mountains, Emmett explained, following her gaze. Engineers said it couldn't be done. He proved them wrong. The wagon rolled to a stop in the ranch yard. Xavier Prescott emerged from the main house, striding toward them with the same confidence Tabitha had witnessed in town. "Mrs. Harlow," he greeted her, offering a hand to help her down from the wagon. "Welcome to the Rocking P." Tabitha hesitated only briefly before accepting his assistance, noting that his eyes met hers directly, never straying to her scars. His hand was warm and calloused, strong but careful as he helped her to the ground. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Prescott," she said formally, withdrawing her hand once her feet touched earth. "Xavier," he corrected, "we don't stand on ceremony out here. Come inside and we'll discuss your duties." The ranch house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a spacious main room dominated by a stone fireplace. The furnishings were simple but well-crafted comfortable chairs, solid tables, and bookshelves filled with volumes that suggested their owner was more educated than the average rancher. "You'll have the bedroom at the end of the hall," Xavier explained, leading her through the house. "Previous manager used it. My quarters are upstairs, kitchen and dining room through there. My office is here." He opened a door revealing a room lined with more bookshelves and dominated by a large desk covered with papers. A smaller desk sat near the window, positioned to catch the natural light. "That would be your workspace," he said, gesturing to the smaller desk. "I've been trying to manage the accounts myself, but I'm better with cattle than ledgers." Tabitha approached the desk, running her fingers along its smooth surface. "May I?" she asked, indicating the papers stacked haphazardly on Xavier's desk. At his nod, she gathered several and began scanning them quickly. Supply orders, cattle sales receipts, correspondence with buyers in California, all jumbled together without organization. "Your operation has grown beyond casual record keeping," she observed. "You need proper ledgers, filing systems, and regular correspondence schedules." A smile tugged at the corner of Xavier's mouth. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. The job is yours if you want it, Mrs. Harlow. Room, board, and $20 a month." The salary was generous, more than she'd expected, suspiciously generous. Tabitha studied him carefully, searching for hidden motives. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. "There must be others in town with similar skills who don't carry my disadvantages." Xavier's expression hardened slightly. "I judge people by their merits, not their appearance. Reynolds said you were educated and needed work. I need someone educated who wants work. It's that simple." "Nothing's ever that simple," Tabitha countered. "Out here it can be," he replied. "Do you want the position or not?" Tabitha thought of the empty boarding house room in Belmont, the whispers and stares, the dwindling options. Here was a chance at not just survival, but purpose. "Yes," she said firmly. "I accept." "Good," Xavier nodded. "Get settled in. We'll start tomorrow morning." Life at the Rocking P quickly established its own rhythm. Tabitha rose before dawn each day, taking her breakfast with Xavier and the ranch hands in the large kitchen before retreating to the office to tackle the mountain of paperwork. The work was challenging but satisfying, bringing order to chaos as she created proper ledgers and filing systems. Xavier proved to be a fair employer, neither hovering over her work nor neglecting to provide guidance when needed. He spent most days outside, overseeing ranch operations, returning late afternoon to review the day's progress with Tabitha. These meetings became a ritual. Both looked forward to Tabitha, eager to demonstrate her competence. Xavier appreciative of her meticulous attention to detail. Their conversations, initially focused entirely on business, gradually expanded to include discussions of books they'd read, views on territorial politics, and observations about the changing seasons. 2 weeks into her employment, Tabitha was working late, reconciling a particularly challenging set of figures by lamplight, when Xavier entered with a pot of coffee and 2 cups. "You're still at it," he observed, setting the tray on a side table. "These accounts won't run away if you leave them till morning." Tabitha smiled faintly. "I prefer to finish what I start. Besides, I think I've found a discrepancy in the breeding stock records." Xavier poured coffee for them both, handing her a cup before settling into the chair across from her desk. "Oh," she nodded, pointing to her notations. "You're missing at least 12 head according to these figures. Either the count is wrong or someone's helping themselves to my cattle," Xavier finished, his expression darkening. "Rustlers have been more active lately. Chamberlain's spread lost 20 head last month. Should we alert the sheriff?" Xavier's laugh held little humor. "Sheriff Davis spends more time in the saloon than on patrol. No, we'll handle this ourselves. I'll have the men increase night patrols." They sipped their coffee in companionable silence, the lamp casting a warm glow over the room. Tabitha became aware of Xavier studying her, his gaze thoughtful. "How did it happen?" he asked quietly. "Your scars." The question, asked without preamble, startled her. No one in Belmont had dared ask directly, though she'd overheard plenty of lurid speculation. "My husband," she said after a moment, her voice carefully neutral. "He was drinking. I spoke when I should have remained silent. And for that, he did this to you." Xavier's voice was controlled, but anger simmered beneath the surface. "He held me down and pressed my face to the stove." The words emerged flat, rehearsed. She'd told this story only once before, to the doctor who'd treated her burns. Afterward, he seemed shocked by what he'd done. He left that night and never returned. "Good," Xavier said grimly. "If he had, he'd deserve hanging." "The law rarely concerns itself with how a man treats his wife," Tabitha observed. "I'm not talking about the law, I'm talking about justice." Xavier's eyes, usually calm, flashed with intensity. "No man worthy of the name raises his hand to a woman, especially not his wife." "You sound like you speak from experience." Xavier's expression shuddered. "I've seen enough cruelty in this world to know it when I encounter it." He rose abruptly. "It's late, we both should rest." He was nearly to the door when Tabitha called after him. "Why don't you flinch?" Xavier turned back, brow furrowed in confusion. "When you look at me," Tabitha clarified. "Most people flinch or look away, you never do." Xavier considered her for a long moment. "Scars tell stories, Mrs. Harlow. Some are just more visible than others." With that enigmatic response, he left her alone with her thoughts and the flickering lamplight. As autumn deepened toward winter, the rustling problem worsened. Twice more, cattle counts came up short despite increased patrols. Xavier grew more taciturn, spending long hours riding the property boundaries with Emmett and the other hands. Late November brought the first significant snowfall, coating the ranch in pristine white. Tabitha, who had never experienced a proper winter in her native California, found herself enchanted by the transformation. Early one morning, she bundled into her warmest clothes and ventured outside, breathing in the crisp, clean air. Movement caught her eye near the barn. Xavier, leading his horse into the yard. He spotted her and raised a hand in greeting. "Early riser," he called as he approached. Most California girls would still be huddled by the fire. "I'm not most California girls," Tabitha replied with a small smile. "Besides, how often does one see such beauty?" Xavier followed her gaze across the snow-covered landscape, dawn light painting the white expanse in shades of pink and gold. "It doesn't get old, even after years," he admitted. "I'm riding out to check the south pasture." "The snow's not too deep yet. Would you care to join me?" The invitation surprised her. "I'm afraid I don't ride." "Never." When she shook her head, Xavier smiled. "Then it's high time you learned. Can't live on a ranch and not ride. Daisy here is gentle as they come." He patted his horse's neck affectionately. Tabitha eyed the large animal warily. "I wouldn't know the first thing about it. That's why I'll teach you. We'll start slow. You can ride with me today, get a feel for it, then proper lessons when we return." A voice in Tabitha's head, one that sounded suspiciously like her late husband, whispered that she would look ridiculous, that she would fail, that she should stick to what she knew. She silenced it with effort. "All right," she agreed. "Though I warn you, I may not be a natural horsewoman." Xavier's smile broadened. "We'll see about that." He helped her mount, his hands steady at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle before swinging up behind her. The proximity was startling, his chest solid against her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. Tabitha sat rigid, uncertain where to put her hands. "Relax," Xavier advised, his breath warm against her ear. "Feel the horse's movement and move with it. Here, hold the pommel if you're nervous." Gradually, Tabitha's tension eased as they rode at a gentle pace through the snowy landscape. Xavier pointed out landmarks, explaining how the land changed with the seasons and how he'd adapted his ranching practices to work with nature rather than against it. "Most ranchers around here overgraze," he explained. "I rotate the herds between pastures, let the land recover. Learned that from studying how buffalo moved across the plains before we nearly wiped them out. That's why your grass is healthier than neighboring ranches," Tabitha realized. "I noticed it when I first arrived. You have a good eye, Tabitha." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it, coupled with their physical proximity, sent a peculiar warmth through her despite the cold air. They crested a rise, and Xavier reined Daisy to a halt. Below them stretched a valley, the snow gleaming under the morning sun, a frozen stream winding through it like a silver ribbon. "It's breathtaking," Tabitha whispered. "This is why I came west," Xavier said quietly. "After everything, I needed open spaces, room to breathe, room to start over." Tabitha hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered since her conversation with Emmett. "You lost someone back east, didn't you?" His body tensed slightly against hers, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. "My wife and daughter, diphtheria took them both within a week of each other. Elizabeth was 26, Emma was 4. "I'm sorry," Tabitha said simply. "It was 6 years ago now." His tone suggested the passage of time had dulled but not eliminated the pain. "I was a federal marshal in Pennsylvania. After they died, the job seemed meaningless. So I came west, bought land no one wanted, and built something new." "You've built something remarkable," she said sincerely. They sat in companionable silence, watching an eagle soar over the valley before Xavier finally turned the horse back toward the ranch. As they approached the ranch yard, Tabitha became aware of a wagon parked outside the main house. A man in a black suit stood on the porch, stamping his feet against the cold. "Were you expecting visitors?" she asked. Xavier's body had gone rigid behind her. "No," he said tersely. "And I don't recognize the rig." As they drew closer, the visitor turned. He was a sharp-featured man with expensive clothes and a trimmed beard. His eyes widened at the sight of Tabitha and Xavier approaching on the same horse. "Well, well," the man called out with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Isn't this a cozy scene?" Xavier dismounted quickly, then helped Tabitha down. "Wait inside," he murmured to her. "Xavier," the stranger greeted with false warmth. "It's been too long." "Not long enough, Mercer," Xavier responded coldly. "What brings the Cattlemen's Association president to my door? Business, of course. Won't you introduce me to your companion?" Tabitha had started toward the house, but paused at this direct reference. She turned back, lifting her chin slightly. "Mrs. Tabitha Harlow, my ranch manager," Xavier said, emphasizing her title. "Mrs. Harlow, this is Theodore Mercer, who owns the largest spread in the county and thinks that entitles him to run everyone else's business." Mercer's eyes fixed on Tabitha's scarred face with undisguised curiosity. How unusual to have a female manager, and one with such distinctive features. The deliberate cruelty of the remark hung in the cold air. Before Tabitha could respond, Xavier stepped between them. "State your business and get off my land, Mercer. My hospitality doesn't extend to men who insult members of my household." Mercer's smile tightened. "Very protective, aren't we? I came about the rustling problem. The association is organizing a response. We're forming a committee, Your committees haven't done a damn thing except line your own pockets, Xavier cut him off. If you want to help, tell Sheriff Davis to do his job instead of drinking your whiskey. The law has limitations, as you well know, Mercer said smoothly. That's why the association feels more direct action is required. Vigilante justice, you mean? Xavier's voice was hard. Like what happened to the Santiago family last year, hanged as rustlers without a shred of evidence. Mercer's expression darkened. They were caught with stolen cattle. They were Mexican, and their land had water you wanted, Xavier countered. I'm not joining your lynch mob, Mercer. Handle rustlers your way, I'll handle them mine. Your stubbornness will be your downfall, Prescott. The association remembers those who stand against it. Mercer's gaze slid to Tabitha. And those they stand with. Good day, Mrs. Harlow. I hope your employment here doesn't lead to difficulties. With that thinly veiled threat, he climbed back into his wagon and snapped the reins. As the wagon disappeared down the road, Tabitha turned to Xavier. What was that about? What did he mean about difficulties? Xavier's jaw was tight with anger. Mercer and his association have been trying to force me out for years. They control water rights, cattle prices, shipping contracts, everything that matters in ranching. I've refused to join or be intimidated. And now he'll use me against you, Tabitha realized. A scarred woman living unchaperoned in your home, he'll spread rumors. Let him, Xavier said grimly. I don't give a damn what Mercer or anyone else thinks. But your reputation means less to me than doing what's right. Xavier's eyes met hers, fierce with conviction. I won't let him or anyone else dictate how I run my ranch or who I employ. His loyalty warmed something in Tabitha that had been cold for a very long time. Still, practical concerns remained. If the Cattlemen's Association turns against you, can the ranch survive? Xavier's expression softened slightly. We'll manage. I've faced worse odds. That evening, as snow began falling again, Xavier and Tabitha sat before the fire in the main room, reviewing the latest cattle counts. The comfortable routine felt different somehow after the day's events, more intimate, more precarious. Mercer wasn't just here about rustlers, Xavier said abruptly, setting aside his papers. The association wants my water rights. The stream that runs through my property feeds half the valley. If they controlled it, they could force out smaller ranchers, consolidate their holdings. Is that legal? Xavier gave a short laugh. Out here, the law is whatever those with power say it is. That's why I diverted part of the stream to create reservoirs insurance against them damming it upstream. You're a remarkable man, Xavier Prescott, Tabitha said softly. Most would have given in to such pressure long ago. I'm just stubborn, he demurred, but looked pleased at the compliment. Speaking of stubborn, are you ready for your first proper riding lesson tomorrow, after today's adventure? Absolutely, Tabitha smiled. Though I may require liniment for sore muscles I didn't know existed. Xavier's laugh was interrupted by a commotion outside, hoofbeats and shouting. He was on his feet in an instant, moving to the window. Riders, he said tersely, reaching for the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Stay inside. But before he reached the door, it burst open and Emmett stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Boss, he gasped. Rustlers hit the south pasture. They've got at least 50 head. Miguel's been shot. Xavier's face hardened. How many? 6, maybe 7 men. Armed and not bothering to hide their faces. Mercer's men, Xavier muttered. Too much of a coincidence otherwise. Where's Miguel now? Tomas brought him to the bunkhouse. He's alive, but bleeding bad. Tabitha stepped forward. I'll see to him. I have some medical knowledge. Xavier looked like he might object, then nodded sharply. Take what you need from the medicine cabinet. Emmett, get every man who can ride. We're going after them. As Xavier strapped on his gun belt, Tabitha caught his arm. Be careful, she said, concern evident in her voice. This feels like a trap. His expression softened momentarily. I know, but if we don't stand now, we might as well hand over the ranch. He covered her hand with his own, a brief, reassuring touch. Bolt the door behind me. Don't open it unless you hear my voice. Within minutes, the sound of galloping horses faded into the night as Xavier and his men rode out. Tabitha gathered medical supplies and hurried to the bunkhouse, where she found Miguel pale and sweating on a narrow cot, a blood-soaked bandage pressed to his shoulder. "Senora Harlow," he greeted her weakly. "Is the boss going after them?" "Yes," she confirmed, kneeling beside him and carefully removing the makeshift bandage. The bullet had gone through his upper shoulder, missing vital areas but leaving a nasty wound. "This will hurt, but I need to clean it properly." For the next hour, Tabitha worked methodically, cleaning the wound, applying antiseptic, and finally bandaging it securely. By the time she finished, Miguel had passed out from pain and blood loss, but his breathing was steady. "He should recover," she told Tomas, who had stayed to assist. "Keep him warm and try to get him to drink water when he wakes." "Gracias, senora," Tomas said respectfully. "You have gentle hands." Tabitha smiled faintly at that. Few had described anything about her as gentle since her disfigurement. As she trudged back through the snow to the main house, worry gnawed at her. Xavier and the others had been gone for hours now, and the storm was worsening. She stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil, knowing the men would need warmth when they returned. If they returned, the thought struck with unexpected force. In just a few short weeks, the rocking P had become more of a home than anywhere she'd lived since childhood. And Xavier. Xavier had become important to her in ways she hadn't allowed anyone to be since before her scars. Near midnight, the distant sound of horses pulled her from her anxious thoughts. She rushed to the window, peering into the swirling snow. Riders approached slowly, too slowly. She threw open the door, heedless of Xavier's warning, and hurried onto the porch. Emmett led the group, supporting a slumped figure on the horse beside him. Even in the darkness, Tabitha recognized Xavier's broad shoulders, his head hanging unnaturally. "He's been shot," Emmett called, his voice tight with urgency. "Help me get him inside." The next hours passed in a blur of blood and fear. Xavier had taken a bullet high in his chest, the lead lodged somewhere Tabitha dared not probe. She cleaned the wound as best she could, packed it with gauze, and prayed the bleeding would stop. "We need a doctor," she told Emmett, who hovered nearby, "the bullet's still in him." "Nearest doctor's in Carson City, 2 days' ride in good weather," Emmett said grimly. In this storm, it'd take longer if a man could make it at all. Tabitha looked down at Xavier's pale face, his breathing shallow and labored. "Then we do what we can. I'll need hot water, more bandages, and whiskey both for the wound and for him when he wakes." "If he wakes," Emmett muttered. "When?" Tabitha insisted fiercely. "Tell me what happened out there." As she worked, Emmett explained how they'd tracked the rustlers to a box canyon. It was a trap, like the boss suspected. They had men positioned on the ridges, started shooting as soon as we rode in. Boss took a bullet early, but kept fighting until we drove them off. "Did you recover the cattle?" "Some. Left them with 2 men to drive home slow tomorrow. We rode back quick as we could after the boss was hit." Emmett's weathered face creased with concern. "I've seen men take wounds like that before. It ain't good, madam." "He's strong," Tabitha said with more confidence than she felt. "And stubborn, he'll fight." Through the night, Tabitha maintained her vigil, bathing Xavier's fevered brow, changing his bandages, and speaking to him in low, urgent tones, though he remained unconscious. As dawn broke, his fever spiked dangerously. "Don't you dare die on me, Xavier Prescott," she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. "Not when I've just found you." The admission startled her even as she spoke it. When had this man become so essential to her? How had he slipped past defenses built over years of pain and rejection? Yet there was no denying the truth of her feelings. The thought of losing him was unbearable. Mid-morning brought a brief moment of lucidity. Xavier's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Tabitha's face. "You're here," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Of course I'm here," she replied, blinking back tears of relief. "Where else would I be?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Beautiful. You're delirious," she said, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. No, his hand weakly caught hers, always thought so. From the first day in town. Your eyes, they see everything. Before she could respond, his eyes closed again and he slipped back into unconsciousness. Tabitha sat frozen, his words echoing in her mind. Beautiful. He'd called her beautiful. For 3 days, Xavier's life hung in the balance as infection set in, bringing fever, chills, and delirium. Tabitha barely left his side, sleeping in snatches, eating only when Emmett insisted. On the 4th morning, the fever finally broke, and Xavier's breathing grew stronger, more regular. By the week's end, he was propped up in bed, pale but alert, as Tabitha changed his bandages. The bullet's working its way out, she observed, examining the wound carefully. Another few days and we might be able to extract it. You've saved my life, Xavier said, watching her work with a gaze that seemed to see through her practiced composure. Emmett says you haven't left this room for more than minutes since they brought me back. Tabitha busied herself with applying fresh gauze. Anyone would have done the same. No, Xavier said firmly, not anyone, not with such care and determination. He caught her wrist gently. Tabitha, look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. Did I dream it, or did I tell you I thought you were beautiful? Heat rushed to her cheeks. You were delirious with fever. You didn't know what you were saying. I knew exactly what I was saying, Xavier contradicted. Fever just removed my inhibitions about saying it. His thumb traced small circles on the inside of her wrist. I've thought you beautiful since that first day in Belmont, when you stood in the street with your head high despite how people looked at you. Tabitha's heart hammered in her chest. Don't, she whispered. Don't say things you can't mean. I've never said anything I didn't mean, Xavier replied steadily. Your scars are part of you, but they don't define you. I see the strength it took to survive them, the courage it takes to face each day in a world that judges by appearances. His voice softened. And I see the woman beneath, intelligent, compassionate, determined. That's what makes you beautiful to me. Tears welled in Tabitha's eyes, years of pain and loneliness threatening to overflow. No one has ever looked at me that way, not since. Then everyone else has been blind, Xavier said simply. He lifted his hand to her face, his thumb gently brushing the ridge of scar tissue along her cheek. But I see you, Tabitha Harlow, I see all of you. The touch tender, reverent where others had been repulsed, undid her. Tabitha closed her eyes, a single tear escaping to trail down her scarred cheek. I thought you were going to die, she confessed, her voice breaking, and I realized I couldn't bear it. You've become important to me. As you have to me, Xavier responded, his eyes never leaving hers. More than I thought possible again. In that moment, something shifted between them, acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since that first meeting in town. Neither spoke further of it, both aware of Xavier's still precarious health and the complications their circumstances presented. But the air between them had changed, charged with possibility. 2 weeks after the shooting, Xavier was strong enough to leave his bed for short periods. Tabitha helped him to the main room, where he settled in his favorite chair by the fire while she prepared a simple meal. Mercer came by yesterday, she informed him as she set a bowl of stew before him. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to upset your recovery. Xavier's expression darkened. What did he want? To express his deepest concern about your injury, Tabitha said dryly. He claimed no knowledge of the rustlers, of course, said the association would be happy to buy your ranch for a generous price given your unfortunate condition. I'll bet he did, Xavier growled. What did you tell him? Tabitha's lips curved in a small, satisfied smile. I informed him that the rocking pea was not for sale at any price, that you were recovering well, and that if association members were discovered on our land again without invitation, they would be treated as trespassers with all that implies. Xavier stared at her for a moment, then burst into laughter that quickly turned into a grimace as it pulled at his wound. I would have paid good money to see Mercer's face. It was quite satisfying, Tabitha admitted, though I don't think we've heard the last of him. No, Xavier agreed, sobering. This was just the opening move. Mercer won't stop until he gets what he wants. Then we'll have to be ready for him, Tabitha said firmly. The ranch ledgers are in better order now. I've been reviewing our contracts and found several places where we're being undercut by association members. Xavier asked, his eyes warm. Tabitha hesitated, realizing her presumption. I mean, your contracts, of course. I simply thought, no, Xavier interrupted gently. I like it very much. As winter deepened, the rocking pea settled into a new routine. Xavier gradually regained his strength, though the wound left him with occasional pain and stiffness in his left arm. Tabitha continued managing the accounts, but took on additional responsibilities, as Xavier taught her more about the ranch operations. True to her word, she learned to ride, proving a natural once she overcame her initial nervousness. Soon she was accompanying Xavier on shorter rides around the property, learning the land as intimately as she knew the ledgers. Their relationship evolved with careful restraint, both aware of the precarious position Tabitha would be in if rumors spread. In public, they maintained professional decorum. In private, small gestures spoke volumes, his hand lingering on hers when passing documents, her careful attention to his comfort as he healed, shared glances across the dinner table that said what neither yet dared speak aloud. January brought heavy snows that isolated the ranch for weeks. During those quiet evenings, they talked for hours before the fire, sharing stories of their lives before fate had wounded them both. I never thought I would feel this way again, Xavier admitted one night as they sat side by side, watching the flames. After Elizabeth died, I closed that part of myself off, thought it was gone for good. I believed no one could ever look at me without seeing only the scars, Tabitha responded softly, that I would always be alone. Xavier turned to her, firelight casting warm shadows across his face. You're not alone anymore, Tabitha. Neither are you, she whispered. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. They sat in comfortable silence, the simple contact expressing what words could not yet capture. February brought a brief thaw, and with it, unexpected visitors. Tabitha was in the barn, checking on a new foal, when she heard wagons approaching. Stepping into the yard, she saw 2 carriages rolling toward the house. The lead carriage bore the Cattlemen's Association emblem. She hurried to the house, finding Xavier already on the porch, his expression grim. Mercer, she asked, coming to stand beside him. And company, Xavier confirmed, nodding toward the second carriage. That's Judge Holloway with him. The carriages stopped in the yard, and Mercer descended first, followed by a portly man in an expensive coat, and 4 other men Tabitha didn't recognize. Prescott, Mercer called with artificial joviality. Good to see you on your feet. We feared the worst after that unfortunate incident with rustlers. I'm sure your concern was genuine, Xavier replied dryly. What brings the association and Judge Holloway to my door? The judge stepped forward, clearing his throat importantly. Official business, I'm afraid. We've received concerning reports about improprieties at the Rocking Pea Ranch. Xavier's posture stiffened. What kind of improprieties? Mercer's smile turned predatory. The kind involving an unmarried woman living under your roof, Prescott. Mrs. Harlow's reputation is the subject of considerable gossip in Belmont. As upstanding citizens, the association feels obligated to address such moral concerns. Fury flashed across Xavier's face. Mrs. Harlow is my ranch manager, employed properly and treated with nothing but respect. There's nothing improper about our arrangement. Perhaps not to your Eastern sensibilities, Judge Holloway said with exaggerated patience. But this is Nevada territory. We have standards of decency to uphold. The situation appears compromising. Tabitha felt sick with humiliation and rage. This was exactly what she'd feared, her presence being used against Xavier, her scars once again making her a target. If you're so concerned with decency, she spoke up, her voice clear despite her internal turmoil, why not address the association members who frequent Belmont's brothel? Or perhaps Mr. Mercer's treatment of the Chinese laborers building his new barn. Mercer's face darkened with anger. Mind your place, woman, this isn't about me. It's about the ranch, Xavier cut in coldly. You tried force and failed, now you're trying slander. We're trying to uphold community standards, Judge Holloway insisted. The association proposes a simple solution. Mrs. Harlow leaves the ranch or what? Xavier challenged. Or you marry her, Mercer said bluntly. That would satisfy propriety. Though who would want to wake up to that face every morning is beyond me, he added with a cruel smile. The insult hung in the air like poison. Before Xavier could respond, one of the men who had remained by the carriages stepped forward. He was older than the others, with a dignified bearing and silver hair. That's enough, Theodore, he said sharply. This isn't what the association agreed to. Stay out of this, Patterson, Mercer snapped. The committee voted to discuss water rights, not to meddle in personal affairs or insult a lady, Patterson countered. He turned to Xavier and Tabitha. My apologies for this intrusion, Mr. Prescott, Mrs. Harlow. Some of us still believe in proper conduct, despite evidence to the contrary. He gave Mercer a pointed look. James Patterson, Xavier explained to Tabitha. He owns the Double P down south, one of the few decent men in the association. Patterson acknowledged this with a nod. Mercer doesn't speak for all of us, though he often pretends to. This visit wasn't authorized as presented. Mercer's face flushed with anger. The association has concerns, the association has greed, Xavier interrupted. You want my water rights, everything else is pretense. Judge Holloway cleared his throat again. Nevertheless, the concern about Mrs. Harlow's situation remains valid under territorial statutes regarding public morality. Then I'll solve it right now, Xavier said firmly. He turned to Tabitha, taking her hands in his. This isn't how I planned to do this, but perhaps it's fitting, given all we've faced together. Tabitha's heart stuttered as she realized his intent. Xavier, Tabitha Harlow, he continued, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. From the moment I met you, I recognized something in you that called to me courage, intelligence, and a heart that refused to be broken despite everything. I love you, scars and all. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The yard fell silent. Tabitha stared into Xavier's eyes, searching for any sign of sacrifice or obligation. She found only sincerity and something else, vulnerability, as if he genuinely feared her refusal. Are you certain? She whispered. This isn't just because of them. I've been certain since December, Xavier replied quietly. I was waiting for the right moment. This isn't it, but my feelings are unchanged. Tabitha's vision blurred with tears. Yes, she said, her voice strengthening. Yes, I will marry you, Xavier Prescott. A slow smile spread across Xavier's face, genuine joy replacing the anger of moments before. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles before turning back to their unwelcome visitors. There you have it, gentlemen, he announced. The impropriety will be rectified by spring. Now, unless there's other official business, I suggest you leave my property before I have my men escort you off. Judge Holloway sputtered indignantly, but Patterson was already steering him toward the carriages. Congratulations to you both, he called over his shoulder. Expect a proper wedding gift from the Double P, Mercer lingered, his expression venomous. This changes nothing, Prescott. The association will have that water one way or another. Get off my land, Mercer, Xavier said quietly. And understand this threaten what's mine again, and our next meeting won't be so civilized. Once the carriages disappeared down the road, Tabitha turned to Xavier, emotion overwhelming her composure. Did you mean it? She asked, voice trembling. Truly mean it? Because if you felt obligated, Xavier silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. I have never been more sincere in my life. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks, the scarred and the smooth alike. I love you, Tabitha. I should have told you weeks ago, but I was afraid of rushing you, of making you feel pressured given your position here. I love you too, she whispered, the words freeing something long caged within her. I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself, after everything. I didn't believe I could be loved again, that anyone could see past this. She gestured to her scarred face. I see you, Xavier said simply. All of you. And then he kissed her, tenderly at first, then with growing passion as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Tabitha laughed softly. What will Emmett and the others think? That it's about time, came Emmett's voice from the barn doorway. He stood with several ranch hands, all wearing broad grins. We've had a wager going since Christmas on when the boss would finally speak up. Xavier groaned. Is there no privacy on my own ranch? Not when you propose in the front yard for all to hear, Emmett replied cheerfully. And for the record, Miguel won the pot. He said February. Tabitha buried her face against Xavier's chest, laughing despite her embarrassment. I suppose everyone knew before we did. Some things are obvious to everyone except those involved, Xavier agreed, his arms tightening around her. Over her head, he gave Emmett a look that sent the foreman herding the others back to work, giving the newly engaged couple a moment alone. I meant what I said about spring, Xavier told her when they had privacy again. Unless you'd prefer to wait longer, Tabitha shook her head. No. Spring sounds perfect, she hesitated, then added, though I worry Mercer won't give up so easily. He won't, Xavier agreed grimly, but neither will we. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. The weeks following Xavier's impromptu proposal were filled with both joy and tension. News of their engagement spread quickly through the county, eliciting reactions ranging from genuine congratulations to thinly veiled disapproval. Tabitha, who had avoided town since starting work at the ranch, found herself the subject of intense curiosity when she accompanied Xavier to Belmont for supplies. Don't let them bother you, Xavier murmured as they walked down the main street, aware of the stares and whispers following them. Their opinions don't matter. They matter to the ranch, Tabitha countered. If the association turns the town against you because of me, the association has been trying to turn people against me for years, Xavier interrupted firmly. Those who would judge us for finding happiness aren't worth our concern. As if to prove his point, he took her hand openly as they entered the general store, a public declaration that their relationship was neither shameful nor secret. Mr. Reynolds, who had once been so uncomfortable around Tabitha, greeted them with cautious politeness. Mrs. Harlow, Mr. Prescott, congratulations on your engagement. Thank you, Reynolds, Xavier replied, his tone making it clear he expected civility from others. As they gathered their supplies, other customers entered, including several women Tabitha recognized as prominent in Belmont society. Their whispered comments carried clearly in the small store. Don't know what he sees in her. Must be desperate after losing his first wife. That face, I couldn't bear to look at it across the breakfast table. Tabitha's hand tightened on the bolt of fabric she'd been examining, old shame threatening to overwhelm her. Then Xavier was beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. I believe this blue would suit you beautifully, he said, loudly enough for all to hear as he lifted a bolt of fine azure fabric. It matches your eyes, perhaps for a wedding dress. The whispering stopped abruptly. Xavier turned, acknowledging the women with a cold nod. Ladies. I trust you're well. My fiancé and I are selecting materials for our spring wedding. We'd welcome your congratulations, of course, but understand if your good manners haven't caught up with your curiosity. Red-faced, the women mumbled hasty congratulations and departed quickly. Reynolds, clearly torn between losing customers and respecting his largest account, busied himself with inventory. You didn't need to do that, Tabitha said softly. Yes, I did, Xavier countered. You are to be my wife, and I won't have anyone treating you with disrespect. He lifted her chin gently. Besides, I meant what I said about the blue. It would look stunning on you. Tabitha smiled, warmth blooming in her chest at his unwavering support. Then blue it shall be. Back at the ranch, preparations for both spring and the wedding kept everyone busy. Xavier insisted on building an addition to the main house, a proper study for Tabitha adjacent to the existing office, with large windows to capture the morning light she loved. "You won't stop being my ranch manager just because you become my wife," he explained as he showed her the plans. "Unless you want to, of course." "I'd like to continue," Tabitha assured him. "I've never felt as useful or valued as I do managing the rocking P." As March arrived, bringing the first signs of thaw, tension with the Cattlemen's Association escalated. 2 more attempts at rustling were thwarted by increased patrols. Then one night, riders attacked a line shack near the southern boundary, burning it to the ground. "It's Mercer, pushing to see how far we'll bend," Xavier said grimly when Emmett brought the news. "He thinks if he applies enough pressure, we'll sell rather than face continued harassment." "What do we do?" Tabitha asked, concern etched on her face. "We increase patrols, arm every man, and prepare for worse," Xavier replied, "and we accelerate our plans. The wedding," Xavier nodded. "I want you legally established as my wife and co-owner of the ranch as soon as possible. If anything happens to me, don't," Tabitha interrupted sharply. "Don't talk that way." "I have to," Xavier insisted gently. "Mercer's desperation makes him dangerous. I need to know that if something happens, the ranch is secured in your name, not vulnerable to association manipulation." Reluctantly, Tabitha agreed. Plans were made for a small ceremony the following weekend, with only the ranch hands and a few trusted friends as witnesses. Judge Patterson, James Patterson's cousin from Carson City, would perform the ceremony, ensuring its legal validity without involving Judge Holloway, who was firmly in Mercer's pocket. 2 days before the wedding, Xavier rode to Belmont to collect the marriage license and final supplies. Tabitha spent the day overseeing preparations at the ranch, including the special dinner planned for after the ceremony. By late afternoon, with no sign of Xavier's return, she began to worry. "He should have been back by now," she told Emmett as evening approached. "It doesn't take this long to reach town and return, even with errands." "Maybe he got delayed at the land office," Emmett suggested, though his furrowed brow betrayed his own concern, "or ran into friends." "Xavier doesn't have friends in town," Tabitha countered. "Only business associates." She moved to the window, scanning the road for any sign of riders. "Something's wrong, I can feel it." As darkness fell with still no word, Tabitha's anxiety grew unbearable. "I'm going to look for him," she announced, reaching for her coat. "Not alone, you ain't," Emmett objected. "Boss would have my hide. I'll get Miguel and Tomas and we'll ride out together." "There's no time," Tabitha insisted. "If he's injured somewhere between here and town," her argument was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats, a single horse approaching at speed. Tabitha rushed outside, Emmett close behind with a lantern. In the dim light, they made out Xavier's gelding, Samson, riderless but still saddled. "No," Tabitha breathed, cold fear gripping her heart. Emmett caught the horse's reins, quickly examining the animal. "No blood on the saddle," he reported. "But look at this." He pointed to a piece of paper tucked into the saddle bag, secured with twine. With trembling fingers, Tabitha extracted the note and held it to the lantern light. The message was brief and chilling: "Water rights or your man. Midnight tomorrow at Coyote Ridge. Come alone with signed deed, Mrs. Harlow, or don't bother coming at all." The note was unsigned, but there was no question of its author. "Mercer," Emmett growled, "the cowardly snake." "Get the men," Tabitha ordered, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice despite the terror clawing at her insides. "All of them. We need a plan." Within the hour, every hand on the rocking P had gathered in the main house. Tabitha stood before them, the crumpled note in her hand, outlining what they knew and what they didn't. "Coyote Ridge is perfect for an ambush," Miguel observed. "High ground all around, only one approach. They'll see us coming miles away." "Which is why we won't all go that way," Tabitha replied. She spread a map of the ranch and surrounding areas on the table. "Xavier showed me these old mining trails last month. They're rough but passable on horseback if you know the way. They lead to the back side of the ridge." You're not actually considering going alone? Emmett asked incredulously. Of course not, Tabitha said, but Mercer needs to think I am. I'll approach from the main trail as instructed. Meanwhile, you and the others will position yourselves above and behind them using these back trails. The men exchanged looks of surprise and respect. This was not the same reserved woman who had arrived at the ranch months ago. It could work, Tomas admitted, but it's dangerous, especially for you, Senora. These men, they are killers. So am I when necessary, Tabitha said quietly. The room fell silent at her words. My first husband, didn't die of fever or accident as I let people believe. After he burned me, after he fled, I tracked him for weeks. I found him in a mining camp near Sacramento. He was drunk, as usual. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes held a cold determination none had seen before. I made sure he would never hurt another woman. The revelation stunned the men. Emmett was the first to recover. Does the boss know? Yes, Tabitha answered simply. I told him everything months ago. Then he knows you can handle yourself, Emmett nodded. But you'll still need protection. We'll make this work, Mrs. Harlow. We'll bring the boss home. Through the night, they refined their plan. Tabitha would ride to the meeting point with what appeared to be the water rights deed. Meanwhile, the ranch hands would split into two groups, approaching from different directions using the mining trails. If all went well, they would surround Mercer's men before any harm could come to either Xavier or Tabitha. What about the actual deed? Miguel asked. The real water rights. Already secured, Tabitha assured him. Xavier placed them in a Carson City bank vault last month with both our names on the account. What I'll bring is a convincing forgery. As dawn broke, Tabitha retired briefly to change and prepare for the confrontation ahead. In her room, she opened a small trunk she'd brought from Belmont and removed a holstered revolver. The weapon had been her constant companion during her journey west, though she had kept it hidden since arriving at the Rocking P. She checked the cylinder fully loaded and strapped the holster beneath her skirts where it would be accessible but invisible. The weight of the gun was both familiar and comforting. I'm coming for you, Xavier, she whispered to the empty room. Hold on. The day passed with excruciating slowness as final preparations were made. Horses were readied, weapons cleaned, routes confirmed. As evening approached, Tabitha donned her riding clothes and a heavy cloak against the night chill. Remember, she instructed the men as they gathered in the yard, no one moves until I give the signal. Xavier's safety is our priority. And yours, madam, Emmett added firmly. Boss would never forgive us if we let anything happen to you. The ride to Coyote Ridge took nearly 2 hours. The men had departed earlier, taking the longer, more circuitous mining routes. Tabitha rode alone down the main trail, the forged deed secured inside her coat, her hidden revolver a reassuring pressure against her thigh. The ridge loomed dark against the star-filled sky as she approached the designated meeting place. A small fire burned at the base of the formation, illuminating several figures. Tabitha reined her horse to a stop at a cautious distance, scanning the scene. Mercer stood by the fire, flanked by 4 armed men. Xavier was on his knees nearby, hands bound behind him, a bruise darkening one side of his face. The sight of him injured ignited a fury in Tabitha that nearly overwhelmed her careful planning. Mrs. Harlow, Mercer called, his voice carrying in the night air. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality in business dealings. Where I come from, Mr. Mercer, kidnapping isn't considered business, Tabitha replied coldly. It's considered a hanging offense, Mercer chuckled, spirited. I can almost see what Prescott sees in you, almost, he gestured to Xavier. As you can see, your fiancé is alive, if somewhat worse for wear. Do you have the deed? Let me speak to him first, Tabitha demanded, dismounting but keeping her distance. Mercer nodded to one of his men, who yanked Xavier to his feet. Despite his bonds and obvious discomfort, Xavier stood straight, his eyes finding Tabitha's across the distance. Don't do it, he called to her. The ranch isn't worth a blow from one of Mercer's men silenced him, sending him staggering. The deed, Mrs. Harlow, Mercer repeated, his tone hardening. Or the next hit won't be so gentle. I have it, Tabitha said, removing the document from inside her coat. She held it up so it was visible in the firelight. Signed and notarized this morning. Release him and it's yours. Bring it here, Mercer instructed, slowly. Tabitha began walking toward the fire, every sense alert for movement in the darkness surrounding them. By now, Emmett and the others should be in position, waiting for her signal. As she neared Mercer, the rustling of a small animal in the brush created a momentary distraction. It was enough for Tabitha to scan the ridge above and catch the briefest flash of light, someone signaling that they were in position. Stop there, Mercer ordered when she was a few yards from him. Toss the deed over. First release Xavier, Tabitha countered. That was the agreement. Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid I'm altering our arrangement. The deed first, then perhaps we'll discuss Prescott's release. You never intended to let him go, Tabitha realized aloud. Of course not, Mercer scoffed. He knows too much about association business. And once I have the water rights, the rocking pea will be vulnerable enough for a proper takeover. He drew his pistol, aiming it lazily at Xavier. Now the deed, Mrs. Harlow, or I put a bullet in your lover's head right now. Tabitha's mind raced, calculating distances, angles, timing. The men on the ridge needed a clear signal, something unmistakable. Very well, she said, keeping her voice steady. She held out the deed, then deliberately let it fall to the ground between them. Oops. As Mercer bent slightly to look at the fallen paper, Tabitha's hand flew to her skirt, drawing her hidden revolver in one fluid motion. She fired a single shot into the air, the prearranged signal. Chaos erupted instantly. Gunfire exploded from the ridge as Emmett and the others opened fire. Mercer's men scattered, diving for cover, momentarily forgetting their prisoners. Tabitha lunged toward Xavier, tackling him to the ground as bullets flew overhead. With quick, practiced movements, she cut his bonds with a small knife from her boot. Are you hurt? She demanded, helping him to shelter behind a boulder. Nothing serious, Xavier assured her, rubbing his wrists to restore circulation, but we need a weapon. Here, Tabitha pressed her revolver into his hands. I'll get another from one of Mercer's men. Before Xavier could protest, she was moving, keeping low as she circled toward where one of Mercer's men had fallen in the initial volley. She reached the body, extracted his pistol, and turned to rejoin Xavier, only to find herself face to face with Mercer himself. You deceitful bitch, he snarled, his own gun aimed at her heart. You'll die for this. A shot rang out, and Mercer's expression transformed from rage to shock. He looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest before collapsing to his knees, then face forward into the dirt. Behind him stood Xavier, Tabitha's revolver still raised and smoking. No one threatens my wife, he said grimly. The remaining gunfire died away as Mercer's surviving men, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons and surrendered. Emmett and the others emerged from their positions, securing the prisoners. Xavier crossed quickly to Tabitha, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Are you all right? When I saw you with Mercer, I'm fine, she assured him, clinging to him with equal intensity. You're the one who was kidnapped and beaten. We need to get you home, have those injuries treated. Xavier drew back slightly, studying her face in the dying firelight. You came for me, organized a rescue, faced down Mercer. Of course I did, Tabitha replied simply. I love you. Did you think I'd just surrender the ranch and leave you to die? No, Xavier smiled despite his split lip. I knew you'd come up with something. I just didn't expect quite such an impressive military operation. He looked around at the controlled scene, the ranch hands efficiently managing the situation. You've won their loyalty completely, you know. They're loyal to you, Tabitha corrected. I just reminded them what that meant. Xavier's expression grew serious. Mercer won't be a problem anymore, but the association won't take this lightly. There will be investigations, possibly charges. Let them investigate, Tabitha said confidently. We have 5 witnesses who will testify to kidnapping and attempted murder. And James Patterson will ensure the association doesn't close ranks around Mercer's actions. You've thought of everything, Xavier marveled. Not everything, Tabitha admitted. I haven't figured out how to salvage our wedding plans. Judge Patterson was supposed to arrive tomorrow. Xavier laughed, then winced as the movement aggravated his injuries. Only you would worry about wedding arrangements in the middle of all this. I've waited long enough to be your wife, Tabitha said softly. I don't want to wait any longer. Xavier cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. Then we won't wait. Patterson can marry us as planned. It will be a wedding no one in Nevada territory will ever forget. True to Xavier's word, the wedding proceeded as scheduled 2 days later. Judge Patterson arrived from Carson City, bringing with him both the legal authority to perform the ceremony and news that the territorial governor had ordered a full investigation into the Cattlemen's Association following Mercer's death. You two have stirred up quite the hornet's nest, the judge commented as he prepared for the ceremony. Half the territory is talking about the Rocking P and its formidable owners. Formidable. Tabitha repeated, adjusting the blue dress she'd chosen for the occasion, the same shade Xavier had selected in the general store. That's the polite term, Patterson chuckled. Others call you the Scarred Angel after how you organized the rescue, and Prescott's reputation has only grown. They're saying no one crosses the Rocking P and lives to tell about it. That's not the reputation we want, Xavier frowned, straightening his tie. Despite the yellowing bruise on his cheek, he looked handsome in his formal suit. Maybe not, Patterson agreed. But it's the one that will keep you safe while this all settles. The association's been cut down to size, but there are still those who resent your independence. Fear will keep them in line until respect takes root. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. The ranch hands stood as witnesses in the main room of the house, decorated with early spring wildflowers gathered by Miguel's wife and daughters. Judge Patterson spoke the traditional words, but it was the personal vows Xavier and Tabitha exchanged that moved everyone present. Tabitha, Xavier began, holding her hands in his, when I came west, I was running from loss, seeking only solitude and purpose. I never expected to find love again, never thought my heart could heal enough to risk such feelings. Then I saw you in Belmont, standing tall despite the world's cruelty, and something in me recognized something in you, a survivor's spirit, a refusal to be defined by your scars. In you, I found not just a partner but a mirror, showing me that the past shapes but doesn't determine us. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to see you always as I see you now, completely, wholly, with all your strength and beauty. I love you, and I will spend every day ensuring you never doubt it. Tears glistened in Tabitha's eyes as she responded. Xavier, you gave me work when I needed purpose, respect when I'd forgotten its taste, and love when I believed it forever beyond my reach. You looked at me when others turned away, valued me when others dismissed me, and loved me when even I struggled to love myself. In you, I found not rescue but recognition, someone who saw beyond the surface to the woman beneath. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face whatever challenges come our way with the same courage and determination we've already shown together. I love you with a fullness I never thought possible again, and I will cherish every day of the life we build together. As Judge Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier drew Tabitha into a tender kiss, publicly claiming her as his own without hesitation or shame. The ranch hands erupted in cheers and applause, Emmett's voice rising above the others. To the Prescotts and the Rocking P. The celebration continued well into the night, with music, dancing, and more food than the small gathering could possibly consume. As evening descended, Xavier led Tabitha away from the festivities to the porch, where they could look out over their land in private. Happy, Mrs. Prescott? He asked, his arm around her waist. Happier than I ever imagined possible, Tabitha replied, leaning into his embrace. Though I'm still getting used to the name, it suits you, Xavier smiled down at her. Almost as well as owner of the Rocking P, co-owner, Tabitha corrected. Partner in all things, remember? I remember every word, Xavier assured her, his expression growing serious. And I meant them all. Whatever comes next, association trouble, ranch expansion, or just seasons changing, we face it together. Tabitha turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. That's what frightened them most, I think. Not just your stubbornness or my planning, but the two of us together. They never expected me to be loved, never thought anyone would stand with me without shame. Their mistake, Xavier said simply, before lowering his lips to hers again. 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the expanded Rocking P Ranch house as Tabitha supervised breakfast preparations. The kitchen was busy not just with the usual ranch hands, but with the extra staff needed now that the Rocking P had become one of the most successful operations in Nevada. "Mama," a small voice called. "Thomas took my book again." Tabitha turned to see her 4-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, racing into the kitchen with an indignant expression, her brother close behind. "Did not," Thomas protested, though the book partially hidden behind his back told another story. At 3, he was already showing signs of his father's stubbornness and his mother's quick mind. "Thomas Xavier Prescott," Tabitha said firmly, "we don't take things that belong to others. Return your sister's book, please." With a dramatic sigh worthy of a much older child, Thomas handed over the picture book. Elizabeth accepted it with dignity beyond her years. "Thank you," she said primly, before sticking her tongue out when she thought her mother wasn't looking. Tabitha suppressed a smile. "Why don't you both go find your father? He should be back from his morning ride by now." The children raced off, their momentary conflict forgotten in the excitement of greeting their father. Tabitha watched them go, heart full with a happiness she'd once believed impossible. After the confrontation with Mercer and the subsequent restructuring of the Cattlemen's Association, the Rocking P had flourished. With James Patterson as the new association president, water rights disputes were settled fairly, and smaller ranchers gained protections previously denied them. Xavier and Tabitha had expanded their operations, investing in improved breeding stock and innovative farming techniques. Their irrigation system, once mocked as impossible, was now studied and copied throughout the territory. The Prescott name had become synonymous with progressive ranching practices and fair business dealings. But their greatest achievements, Tabitha reflected as she heard the children's excited squeals from the front yard, had nothing to do with cattle or water rights. She moved to the window, watching as Xavier swept both children into his arms, spinning them around before setting them down to race toward the corral where he'd promised Elizabeth her first riding lesson today. At 39, Xavier was still as handsome as the day she'd met him, though the silver at his temples had spread further into his dark hair. From the corral, Xavier looked up and caught sight of Tabitha watching. Even after 5 years of marriage, the smile he gave her still made her heart quicken. He said something to the children, then strode toward the house. "Good morning, beautiful," he greeted her as he entered, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that suggested the passion between them had only deepened with time. "The children are waiting for their riding lesson," Tabitha reminded him, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "They can wait 5 more minutes," Xavier murmured against her neck. "I need a moment with my wife." 5 years today," Tabitha said softly. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it." Xavier drew back to look at her, his gaze taking in every feature of her face, the scars that had faded somewhat but would always mark her, the smile lines that had joined them, the clear eyes that had first captured his attention. "I believe it," he said. "Every day I wake up beside you, every time I see you with our children, every moment we build this life together, I believe in the miracle we've created." "Xavier Prescott," Tabitha laughed softly. Who knew such a tough rancher could be such a romantic? Only with you, he replied, kissing her again. Only ever with you. From the corral came impatient calls as the children demanded their father's attention. With reluctance, Xavier released his wife. Duty calls, will you join us? Elizabeth would love having you watch her first lesson. I wouldn't miss it, Tabitha assured him. I'll be there in a moment. As Xavier headed back outside, Tabitha paused to look around the home they'd built together, not just the physical structure, but the life it contained. From the desperate, scarred woman who had arrived in Belmont with nothing but determination, to the confident ranch mistress and mother she had become, the transformation seemed impossible. Yet here she was. No one had believed she could be loved, not the townsfolk of Belmont, not the society women who had whispered behind their hands, not even Tabitha herself. No one except Xavier, who had done it without shame or hesitation from the very beginning. Tabitha touched her scarred cheek briefly, a gesture that had once been unconscious shame, but now held a different meaning, a reminder of survival, of the journey that had brought her here, to this life that exceeded her wildest dreams. Outside, her family waited. Tabitha Prescott smiled and went to join them in the bright Nevada sunshine. Stepping confidently into the future they would continue building together.